Professor of African Politics at Unisa Everisto Benyera joins us now for more on the story. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for your time. 3 years on, do we have winners and losers in this war?
We have 2 losers and 1 winner. The 2 losers are Ukraine and Russia, and the winner are those that are manufacturing and selling arms. But we also have some hidden casualties. Firstly is Europe's security, which now is under a very complete set of uncertainty. And secondly, we are seeing a huge uncertainty and insecurity creeping into the European energy security. Europe is now more energy insecure than it was before the war. The once famed German industry is suffering, with more than 2,000 German companies that were at least 100 years old having been reported to close because of the high energy costs, courtesy of the sanctions that Greater Europe imposed on Russian gas. And obviously, there is the issue of the global food security. So it's very difficult for us to glean any good stories from this war, other than that those that are selling the arms are the ones that are profiteering and smiling all the way to the proverbial bank.
But is there an appreciation by all of the reality that you have just described, but how it then affects both the people presently, but going into the future, if, God forbid, this war indeed continues?
It is very unlikely that this war will continue because of the Trump factor. You alluded in your introduction how Trump made a very sudden turn towards Ukraine, not only branding President Vladimir Zelensky as a dictator, but taking that 90-minute phone call with President Vladimir Putin that resulted in the re-embrace of Russia and a double turning point, first towards Russia and secondly towards Europe. President Trump is on record saying that Russia and China pose very little threat to the United States, and further that if there is a threat to the United States, it comes from Europe's dependence on the United States for underwriting Europe's security. So we are seeing a rearrangement of both transatlantic relations and, most importantly, the posture that Russia was having, heads down, shoulders down. Suddenly, we see a high-level meeting between the American Secretary for State and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov at that high level. That shows us one thing, that there is a new form of politics which is more transactional and less administrative.
That's what I wanted to ask. I mean, what is driving Donald Trump's attitude towards both Russia and Ukraine?
President Donald Trump is moving towards a type of politics where the state is involved in a transactional relationship. By an administrative state, I am referring to the use of a vast network of bureaucratic agencies and civil servants that are there to implement laws, regulations, and policies. If we are to read the way that President Trump treated the US aid, treated other American agencies, is using Elon Musk as a de facto prime minister, and then you read into what is termed a transactional state, which is a state that is involved in more direct business-like approach to governance, one where decisions are often made based on immediate and short-term considerations, where there is an emphasis on deal-making, negotiation, and individual exchanges. This is exactly what Trump is looking for when he said to President Zelensky, "You are going to give us access unfettered access to your rare earth minerals in exchange for the money that we gave you during the time of the presidency of Joe Biden. By the way, there is a dispute of how much of that constituted a loan and how much was that was a grant. According to President Trump, it was more of a loan and less of a grant, and the opposite for President Vladimir Zelensky. So the misunderstandings and misalignments between President Trump and President Zelensky are increasing with each round of negotiations that they are having. To his credit, President Zelensky is trying by all means to remain diplomatic, to remain not as combative, not to go into the combative corner that President Donald Trump is. And when it comes to Russia and China, America is seeing more of opportunities transaction-wise as they try to implement this ideology of MAGA, which is Make America Great Again, and the ideology of America First.
And where does that leave Europe?
In a very cold place. In a very cold place, because the European economy, the European security architecture under the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, as much as it has been expanding, was underwritten by the United States. Now that the United States made it explicit that if there is a peace that has to be enforced between Ukraine and Russia, it has to be European boots that are on the ground, not carrying the NATO banner, but their individual states. This makes Europe a very cold place, literally and proverbially. And the corollary to that is the rise in the right-wing politics, the rise in right-wing nationalist government, such as seen in the victory, not the victory, but in the electoral gains that were made by the far right AfD in Germany in the recent elections. What is happening in Germany is actually a prototype of what will happen in broader Europe. We wait to see what will happen with Marine Le Pen in France and other right-wing politicians in Europe. So definitely, these are unprecedented times for Europe. And this is why European politicians gathered on the sidelines of the Munich security meeting to try and find a solution, a quick solution to what they are to do with this unprecedented challenge that they faced.
Now, you have these people who have leaders who have gone to Kiev and laying writs and so on. What is there something that they should appreciate about what Trump has started doing and where it will put their respective countries?
If there is anything to appreciate from what President Donald Trump is doing, not only to Europe, not only to Ukraine, but even by extension to all of us in Africa, in South Africa, is that it is not a good space to have your security underwritten by another state, whether it is the human security of your people, the provision of ARV, the provision of life-saving medication, the provision of the budget. The budget, about 60 to 80% of Malawi's budget is provided for by external donors, mainly the United States of America. We have just learned that no matter how difficult it is, we must try by all means to fend for ourselves and not to rely on bilateral benevolences, because it will just take one president to come into office and everything will drastically change. So for Europe, I think it is high time, since the Second World War, that they have to take responsibility for their own security, for their own economic interest, and not always to rely on the United States. For others, this day was always going to come, and it came sooner than they expected, Vuyo.
And in a, well, some would say, a bit of a twisted way, Trump is changing the world.
there are times in the world where you will have one president who is so consequential. Apologies. Donald Trump is one such president. Whether we like his changes or not, the fact of the matter is that in a week, in a month, he has done so much for his country, which has had global ramifications, be it the stop order work for USID, be it the email that was sent by Elon Musk over the weekend, telling all agency workers to write and to respond to an email in a bullet point stating the 5 things that you achieved in the past week. All those things were not known. It was not common politics, but this is politics unusual. And what Donald Trump is showing the world is that there is another way of doing politics. Look at the volumes of those executive orders that he has written. The fact that Donald Trump will first of all threaten to impose tariffs on Canada, tariffs on Mexico, to seize the Panama Canal, to take Greenland, to move everybody out of Gaza. After making those pronouncements, then he will go on to negotiate. Look at what he has done to Ukraine, telling Ukraine that it is not going to join NATO, that there is no way in which it will gain back the land that Russia seized through war. How do you then, as Ukraine, get into a negotiation where Russia has already been given that upper hand by the person who is supposed to be your biggest supporter, your biggest benefactor, your biggest donor? So this is definitely a wake-up call that nationalism is something that we must consider. Yes, on top of the pains of our economies that are over-integrated, there is a price that we are all paying for over-integration into the global economy. Because when a president like Donald Trump comes, the divorce will be very painful.
I think it was the American editor of The Economist magazine. I saw a clip of him talking about how Trump was either mad or pretending to be mad, but whatever it is, it seems to be working for him.
It is working for him and his base. And when President Trump was campaigning, he was making these campaign promises that appeared to be too much on the right, that appeared to be too much nationalistic, too much inward looking. And we thought it was only campaign talking that was bordering on populism. And then he turned up and said, a promise made is a promise kept. And today he is following up on those claims that he made. And one after the other, he is implementing them through the executive orders. And one has to ask, what happened to democracy in the United States? What happened to the institution of the checks and balances? The answer, Vuyo, in my suggestion is that when the Constitution, when these institutions were drafted, they did not have a president like Donald Trump in mind. But Donald Trump, as he is, look at the way at which he is demystifying the White House, having Elon Musk coming in, Elon Musk carrying his son on his head and answering journalists while he was standing over Donald Trump in the White House. What political image, what political message was being portrayed by that image, Vuyo?
Professor Everisto Benyera, let me thank you very much for your time and insights.